Hey everyone, I'm Mia Voss, and I'm doing a follow-up interview with Gary Hirshberg, who is the chairman of Stonyfield Farms. He was one of the keynote speakers at ShiftCon 2014 that just wrapped up recently. Blown away by Gary, so I wanted to follow up and get an interview with him as well, talk about the speech that he gave and what Stonyfield is doing. So welcome, Gary. It's good to see you.
Hi, Mia. Great to see you again.
Where are you at?
I'm in New Hampshire, back in the home front, gearing up for the next round of GMO speeches across the country.
Excellent, and you have been on quite a whirlwind tour, which was, of course, finishing with your talk at ShiftCon, which, again, it was just such an eye-opening experience for me. I thought I was really in the know, and then, of course, to sit down and listen to what you had to say on Friday night was amazing. So let me back up a second and find out how you got involved with ShiftCon and became one of the keynote speakers.
Yeah, I think Stonyfield has, from the very beginning, even before there was social media, always believed in the power of one. Back in the early 80s when we started, when one used to mail by snail mail all your communications to consumers, to educate our customers about what we do, we would allow them to send in 5 yogurt lids and they could adopt a live Stonyfield cow. They would get a certificate naming them the co-owner of their cow, and then they would get a letter from their cow twice a year. So we were doing kind of social media before there was social media. So it only follows that when Leah and ShiftCon came around that they turned to us. We have always excelled at having a very sophisticated and active conversation with our eaters out there. And it's because, again, I deeply believe from the very beginning of our company, and I believe only more so today, that while we as individuals out there as consumers, we often feel like we're the victims of whatever's being sold to us. But actually, I believe we're at the top of that pyramid. I believe that we actually, there are no accidents out there. The size, shape, color, price of any product being sold is no accident. It's a result of millions and billions of dollars of research. So for me, the key is mobilizing our power, collecting our individual power, turning the whole thing around from feeling like we're victims to being the ones who can drive and dictate whether foods are going to be organic or GMO free or local or what have you. So when Leah got in touch, I was perfectly happy to add this to as you say, an already busy national tour. My main focus these days is helping individual consumers understand why we need mandatory labeling of genetically engineered foods. And the ShiftCon audience was perfect for that message.
I was saying too, I know it was really nice for all of us to be in an atmosphere where we were being fed well with great products. Usually when people go to conferences, there's some dietary issues, so that was fantastic. And then to be around all these people that were so like-minded, not rabid, but very like-minded. So, and I can see the common theme I saw with the conference was awareness and education and grassroots.
Yeah, I think people, I was impressed. I knew this was going to happen because I knew Leah is just so, so smart about this stuff. But I was impressed by how diligent the attendee the facts. Every data point I would present, people would come up to me after and say, do you have a reference? Do you have a reference? How do I follow up? This is about us getting ourselves educated. In many ways, the good food movement, as I call it broadly, because this isn't just about organic, it's not just about local, it's not just about GMO, it's about really getting our food system to be responsive to what we all want, which is healthy, safe, good for the environment as well as good for our families. But we're playing catch up. We are, in the case of chemicals in our food, we've been engaged in a 50, 60 year experiment with our bodies and the planet, allowing kind of corporate expediency to be the dominant paradigm. And, we weren't ever asked, do we want, pesticides in our topsoil? And now we're being asked because now we're being educated. And, the reality is that really smart companies out there, and you saw many of them, they were the sponsors of the event, and I know there'll be double that many next year. Those are the companies who understand that this is not a fad. This is a mega trend. we are taking back the power that we gave up. And I think in the big picture, we've done a lot of damage. We see cancer rates out of control. You see virtually every um, negative health trend out there. Ultimately, sooner or later, comes back to either how we're treating our bodies or the planet. But I think in the big picture, in the long run, we will look back in the future at this period and recognize that, yeah, we went off into a little cul-de-sac, a place we can come back out of. I don't see it as a dead end. But it starts with educating ourselves. It starts with this kind of dialogue. It starts with people like yourself interpreting and translating, frankly, complicated scientific concepts into more simple terms that give people the power to make good and conscious choices.
What I was
and certainly, I should add, certainly the organic food movement is an absolute symbol of that trend. When I started, we had 7 cows. Back in 1983, nobody, I often say we had a great company, no supply and no demand. Nobody knew what we were talking about. But, today it's a $35 billion sector growing faster, 20% compounded growth rate, going faster than, conventional food. You see the explosion of CSAs and farmers markets and so on. And this is an expression of what people want.
I love it that obviously it's more mainstream. The crazy factor is definitely off of this movement, which is wonderful. The one thing I kept seeing was organic food, or as our grandparents used to call it, food.
Right.
I love that.
Right.
That was popping up too.
Well,
go ahead.
People say organic is this new thing. Really, it's the chemicals that are new. I'll get into debates with big food companies, and they'll say, Gary, organic really isn't proven. And my comment to them is, actually, it's the chemicals that are not really proven. Every famous person in history ate organic food. All of civilization grew in organic food. The 19th century, there were no chemicals used in food production. So and what we're finding out, of course, is we're getting 60, 70, 80 years of data back on intensive chemical use. And that's why, as Robin points out, and I point out, 1 in 2 men are now going to be diagnosed with cancer, 1 in 3 women. By the way, that's an important thing. I want to add to Robin's comment. What she was referring to was the President's Cancer Panel that came out in 4 years ago. They said 41% of Americans will be diagnosed with cancer. What you should know is when Ronald Reagan convened that panel in the 1980s, it was 20% of Americans. So we've doubled our percentage. And of course, we see this with autism and obesity, and so this isn't just about a political seizing of our power. This is about actually taking control of our health system. The most expensive way to treat ourselves to deal with healthcare is after we're sick. The cheapest is preventative, right? The cheapest is not getting sick in the first place. And so, that's why I call this the good food movement, because this is about. It's really an extension of healthcare. It's about good and proper living, and there's no reason. So much of this is preventable. That's why, nobody pays me to do what I do. This is why, and Robin too. This is why we get up every day and go out and give these talks, because, we deeply believe that future generations need to be spared this sort of experiment that we've been on in this generation.
And what you're talking about is moving from a reactive society to a proactive society, and certainly healthcare is involved with that, because that's the offshoot of it. Is it becomes about health. And and we're speaking of Robin O'Brien, by the way. She was one of the other keynote speakers who, she was busting out some serious facts in her keynote. You did as well. One of the ones was, if you could talk for a minute about the rain in Nebraska with chemicals.
Yeah, it's actually Iowa. What I was referring.
All that Midwest.
No, well, first of all, you should know Robin and I are basically partners. We're board members of Just Label It and Organic Voices. We've been working together for a long time. That's why it's so easy for me to sort of swing back and forth. Sometimes I don't know which of us is speaking.
That's a power partnership, brother.
Right, but what I was referring to is the fact that what people when they take on the GMO issue, they say, well, are they safe? And I want to know what's in my food, and that's important. But to be honest, it's going to be a generation before we know whether these crops are safe or not. But the reality is it's not just about what's in our food. It's about what we're putting down on the earth and in our air, soil, and water to produce these foods. And what I was pointing out is little known fact is that 90% of genetically engineered foods that have been introduced since 1996 when they were first deregulated have been for herbicide tolerance and insecticide use. And the net result of that, so we've created crops that can withstand herbicide use, which would kill all other plants. And what this has meant is it's unleashed literally an explosion of herbicide use. The numbers that I provided in my speech were that from 1996 to 2011, we used over 500 million pounds of glyphosate in America. Roundup, you would know it. And by the way, since 2011, the data is still being compiled, USDA data, but it's probably now close to 1 billion pounds. And this is a trend line. It's going up. And the expression of that is that now the U.S. Geological Survey has found in the Midwest, and Iowa in particular, that in 60 to 100% of rainwater samples, you will find the presence of Roundup, of glyphosate. And, you know, the chemical companies who refer to themselves these days as biotech because they're in the seed business as well, but Dow, DuPont, Syngenta, Monsanto, you know, they'll say, wait, Gary, you know, this is glyphosate. It's a safe herbicide. It's you know, compared to the really bad ones that we used to use, this one's safe. And that was, you know, relatively true, except that they say right on the label, don't use near children. Yeah. And even more to the point, we now have meta-analyses, which I shared with the audience, that show there's an absolute link between glyphosate and Parkinson's disease, brain development, and probably a whole host of other issues that we don't yet know about. There's been published data the last few years that link pesticides to IQ. And the real problem that I was really trying to accentuate is that we don't know what the effects of glyphosate are at these levels that we're now using. We used to use glyphosate pre-season when you put your seeds in the ground to wipe out any weeds. So when the little seedlings made their way up, there was no competition. But now, because the plants withstand herbicide use, we dump, you know, whenever we want. And as I explained in my talk, and this is again not to try to be the most depressing guy you've ever interviewed here, but you know, the problem gets a lot worse. You know, Lily Tomlin says it got a lot worse before it got worse, and that's kind of what's happening here, because now what's happened is the overuse of a formerly effective herbicide has resulted in weeds that are now resistant. They no longer, you know, as I said, when nature's under assault, it doesn't do focus groups, right, to figure out what to do. It just mutates. And these weeds are now glyphosate resistant, which means that these very same chemical companies selling these seeds which enable greater use of their chemicals are now using even stronger chemicals. And now you have something that we used in Vietnam, half of Agent Orange, called 2,4-D, being used across this country. And you can bet it's in the rainwater in the Midwest. And now Dow has introduced a new combination called Enlist Duo, which is a 2,4-D dicamba, which the point is they're very carcinogenic, they're very toxic, you know, they say, well, don't worry, it doesn't drift in the air, it's heavier molecule. Well, with the Environmental Working Group, my organization, Just Label It, figured out that there's over 500 elementary schools within 200 feet of a corn or soy field. And just in case it does drift 1,000 feet, there's 6,000 elementary schools. That means soccer balls, you know, dust in the playground, kids, you know, putting their touching the ground, putting their hands in their mouths. I mean, this is a ridiculous and absurd situation. So this is what I talk about more broadly, why we need to get control of this. The only real answer to this is for consumers to know what we're eating and to be able to choose the foods by having it on our label, so we can allow the marketplace to work. So you and I can walk into Safeway or Vons or Whole Foods, or choose not to go to a supermarket and go to our CSA or farmers market, but to buy foods that do not encourage the greater and greater use of these chemicals. And I really do believe we can turn this around that way. We've just got to allow the marketplace to work, and that's really what labeling's all about.
And that's the work that you're doing. Again, it's about the awareness, because I'm sure that the group that you're working with, they had to do a lot of digging to find out those facts. This is not stuff that the common person knows. And to bring it back on to ShiftCon, what was interesting is I interviewed another woman, and she's in this series as well, living in Iowa. And I have to tell you, when I spoke to her on Saturday morning, she was still reeling from the information that you gave her, because she and her husband moved their family of 4 from Colorado Springs to Iowa, and they're actually building a home. They're kind of the crazy people in the neighborhood, because they're building this safe home that that's going to be a lot more of a green built type of home, which is kind of crazy in that neighborhood anyway. But yet they're surrounded by cornfields. And I'll tell you again, it was interesting to speak with someone who was literally just sitting in that reality of something she absolutely didn't know, and has 4 kids under 10.
Well, we all, honestly, we all live in Iowa, because this is happening in 40 to 50 states. We're all downwind from somewhere. I mean, believe me, Iowa doesn't have an exclusive on the use of Roundup. In California, from California to New England, it's being used. Super weeds, these herbicide-tolerant weeds, are endemic across the entire southeast. So, this woman, who I'm sympathetic with, is hardly alone. And maybe just to make the connection to an earlier question you asked, let me just sort of explain what we are doing here. So I obviously grew Stonyfield for 28 years, and we proudly support ShiftCon and all kinds of other conferences. I'll be at the Ideas Week in Chicago next week, speaking about the same thing. But I recognize that after building a $400 million company and being a part of this growing industry, it wasn't enough to just grow great companies, because the woman you just talked about, and you and me and our children and our children's children, need us to get organized politically. And so that's why I formed and invited Robin and some other amazing people to join me in the board of this organization called Organic Voices, which has the Just Label It campaign. And that's really, I shifted from running my company to doing this full time, getting out and helping to educate ourselves. To be very blunt about it, we have lots of data. As you said, we've done the research. We have a panel of incredible scientists who are behind us. We're gathering it. But we are useless without folks like you and without ShiftCon, because we don't have the dollars to buy massive amounts of advertising. We're not taking out full-page ads in the New York Times, as Monsanto and Dow and the others do. And by the way, it makes it hard to get editorials in those papers, because the line gets crossed between publishing and editorial. Even though we have absolutely eye-opening, riveting, compelling data that ought to be in op-eds, and believe me, I've submitted plenty. So we need social media. We need this kind of grassroots engagement. This is how I built my company, one spoonful at a time, and I think this is how we're going to build the movement that retakes our country.
And one adopted cow at a time. I love that. I want to adopt a cow, and then I want a selfie with it. So remind me. I want to get a Stonyfield cow. And I'll tell you that. And to go, the other thing I loved about ShiftCon, so you and Robin covered the food element, and then of course a lot of the sponsors and the people that were involved were also about products as well. So it's I wrote it down, on, in, and around. Yeah. So what we put on our bodies, we'll put in our bodies, what's around us in our environment. There's a lot of different elements to it.
That's right. And just to be really blunt with your followers, your viewers, I'm obviously very active politically. I'm in New Hampshire. The presidential campaign has already begun. I'm involved in races all over the country, and I think it's incredibly important that we be politically active. But we need to remember that while we vote at the polls once every 2 or 4 years, we vote every single time we shop. The act of purchasing, of running an item past a scanner, is a vote. And believe me, I know this from having grown my own company. Corporate America spends billions to tally those votes. So we just have to, follow that adage. I said that, anyone who thinks they're too small to make a difference has never been in bed with a mosquito, right? We have to be mosquitoes. We have to buzz and bite and buy and purchase. And even if we don't can't buy everything organic. Buy a few things, but more importantly, communicate to your whoever it is, your store, your supermarket, your school. That's what you want, because the more they hear and understand that's what they're going to need to provide to keep you happy as a customer, that's what's going to come to be. That's how we're going to push back and get glyphosate out of the rainwater in the Midwest.
It's definitely about empowerment, which is good and bad on both, because it's like you can make a choice and then you can make a choice. So when you decide that, it really is. It's like, okay, you can make it. You make a difference. So you do have to make a choice. And I thought a lot about it since I've been home. It's been great to have all of the fun swag, just all these great products that I can try out, but it's also made me acutely aware of some of the crud that I got going on in my house. So there's a little bit of a double-edged sword to it. It's a bit uncomfortable to become that aware. I believe it was Robin that said, of like, I didn't make this choice to become this advocate until, I think she was saying, like, sitting in the hospital when she saw the Fruit Loops and the Jell-O served up for her sick son. I was like, what is this? So that was her shift movement as well. So when I first began, I used to go out with some cancer statistics. This is back in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. And at that time, it was something like 1 in 10 of us would get cancer. Now, again, it's, 1 in 2 or 1 in 3. Mm-hmm. That's what has happened in one generation. And, every one of us has had that moment that Robin has had. For me, it's 4 or 5 friends who I've lost now to one form of cancer or another, and many more who have it. It's a wife who has had breast cancer twice. It's awareness that particularly farm families are especially vulnerable, and kids growing up on farms. But, you stand in front of an audience and ask how many people know someone with cancer, every hand is going to go up now. That was not the case when I started in business. And so that's why it's this isn't just a kind of a long-term, thing that is needed. There's some urgency here. We need to exercise those votes, and I'm the first to accept, and I'm the first to get that. Organic is more expensive, and that means it's not that easy for folks to get this. But yet now that's why I've been pushing to see, organic in Walmart and Target and places like that, and pushing farmers markets and pushing CSAs, because the more we ask, the more it's going to be available. The more available it is, the less expensive it's going to be. Not that cheap food is the goal, because cheap food is not cheap, right? We pay for it sooner or later. We pay for it in our health care, but at least we can bring the premium, the gap between organic, down a little bit, and that will come from volume, from more people asking and buying. I did notice that too. I felt like a lot of people were saying that of making their companies were really working on the accessibility of it, the Costco, the Walmart, and the regular drugstores. I think it used to maybe seem like it was not good for you to be in bed with, so to speak, these companies, but it's like, why not make it more accessible? That's where a lot of the mainstream buyers go. It's easy to go to, so make it more of an easier process. So I was really encouraged to see that with a lot of the presentations and speakers, that they're working towards that as well. It's a pretty tough gap to cover, though, right?
Yeah, well, look, there wasn't even a Whole Foods when I first started. Right. And so we are grateful to the heroism of Whole Foods and the whole natural products industry for giving us a chance. But, these companies are competing with Walmarts and Targets and Safeways and Kroger's. So don't give up on them either. They're doing their part. But you're right. When we first launched at Walmart, honestly, you would have thought I was public enemy number 1 in the organic movement. I got attacked personally. He's selling out. He's selling to Walmart. But if your viewers or you have seen a movie, Food Inc., you'll see in the film I'm shown taking Walmart on a tour of an organic farm. That really happened. It wasn't staged, and the filmmakers came along, because I so believe that the reality is organic is not food for the elite. Organic should be food for everybody, and unfortunately, whether we like it or not, a huge portion of our populace is lucky if they have a Walmart where they can buy it. Many live in food deserts where there's no place they can buy food, and the reality is anywhere food is sold, it should be organic. That's, again, only going to be a result of you and me and everybody who's viewing this and your work, saying, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do that. Again, on a very practical level, you don't have to buy everything organic. If you go to EWG, Environmental Working Group's website, you'll see, for example, the top 10 fruits and vegetables to avoid if you cannot buy organic. The ones that use the most pesticides. And I can just tell you, strawberries and peaches are at the top of the list. We know now that dairy, because of hormones and antibiotics, and meat would be very good things to at least get GMO free, but really more safely organic is best. But should every last thing in your refrigerator look like mine and be 100% organic? Yes, if you can afford it, but we understand it's the step of 1,000 miles begins, it's with one step, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And we have a wonderful food co-op in my town here in Concord, and I can tell you it's too small a town for a Whole Foods, and but this place, I think probably 50% of it is local and organic. So this is the food is out there. You have to work a little harder. There's a lot you can get online. One of our sponsors at the show, at the conference, was Orgain, this organic protein drink, especially for picky eaters, by the way. You can buy Orgain at Amazon. You can just, as a matter of fact, I was with your governor,
yes.
In fact, the other day, who was telling me that his son, he has a hard time getting protein into his kids. So I, told him about Orgain. He went online and, there it is, Amazon. So you can, the choices are becoming more available and it's becoming easier. But again, we've all got to be part of this. We've all got to grab an oar and pull.
And thanks for the reminder on that too. I think that I was going to ask you for some practical calls to action, and I love that because it really is that, like you said, the journey of 1,000 miles is the first step, and that is in just making choices. Because I think for a lot of us too, just changing everything over at once really is a setup for failure because you're going to get overwhelmed, right? So if you can just do one by one.
No question, no question. I mean, again, I would say there's two practical places to go. One is, like I said, Environmental Working Group, ewg.org. Go there, you'll get some really good ideas. The other is go to justlabelIt.org and add your name to our petition, because that's how we're building our political power. We have 1.4 million people have signed a petition with the federal government with the FDA demanding labeling. But we've got to get that number to get our way. So, this is, again, something you can do at home. You don't have to go out and march. I mean, we welcome you if we ever have a march or an event. But just a couple of clicks, and, right there between EWG and Just Label It, you have a tremendous amount of power right at your keyboard.
I want to shout out Natural Grocers was also at the conference too. They're doing some big work as well. So
absolutely.
But I'm going to put all of that into the links here for the show. Just Label It, and then EWG you said as well, right?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, I love it. Listen, I want to talk about you for a second. So I'm reading up about you, and I see that President Obama appointed you to serve on the advisory committee. You're on several corporate and nonprofit boards, and all I can think was, gosh, I wish Gary would do something with his life, because you just have done so many cool things. I love what you're up to. I was so pleased to meet you, and so I want to thank you for all the great work that you're doing. I know it's a long road, and I love that you partnered with Robin as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you will see a lot more mischief from her and me coming up. But listen, Mia, thank you. Thanks for your interest, and thanks to all your viewers for taking the time to get educated. That is how we seize our power. That's how we retake the country.
One by one.
One by one.
Thank you so much, everybody. Please go and should we subscribe at Stonyfield? Would that be a good call to action for you?
Yeah, if you go to stonyfield.com. Or on Facebook, join us. By the way, you can adopt a cow. Anybody can. But I would say that Stonyfield.com, EWG.org, and Just Label It would be really important places for people to plug in.
Everybody get empowered, take some action. I'm Mia Voss. This is Gary Hirshberg with Stonyfield Farms. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Pleasure, Mia. Talk to you
Thank,
soon.
thank
Bye-bye.
you.